I just juggling for the time everything. Inspection, west inspection, sidewalk inspection, saving on the photographers. I had to what do you call it? Agent.
1 second.
Yeah, the Avid, I had to get them to do
Oh, I didn't
stuff,
see the
plus
sign right. I didn't
they
either.
were trying to like do repairs, so like right now I don't have a home inspection because they got the home inspection. They wanted to, like,
Stephen, they're saying there's no signing sheet for today.
Yeah, there is. I handed it around. There it is. All right, we are going to just be starting in a moment. YouTubers.
My stagers realized I was gonna be a photographer like the next day. They were like, we're not done.
So
And plus,
oh, you were one of the people I texted. Thank you. I was just missing one.
like, I got this. You
You were just missing two. I texted you and that other person because I'm not.
I'm sorry, I wasn't glad you even thinking about the class.
You got it. Money. And I don't know how it will work. That's for a lot of money. All right, we're gonna start.
No, you're really little.
What was I gonna do? Get it out, let me deal with this whole. Kind of had to do it, but I don't really think I'm on the hook because they already did stuff.
Right, did they respond?
And I'm very good useless.
Okay,
We'll see.
okay, so we are gonna talk about property taxes. Property taxes, clearly not a very sexy subject in the room anyway. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about property taxes, and I want to start with a warning. A warning. We are real estate agents. We are not CPAs. We are not tax professionals. So we have to be very careful about what we say about taxes. We cannot give tax advice. So you can talk about what I'm about to teach you about how the system works, but you cannot talk advice. You cannot say to somebody, and here's how it applies to your taxes. Most people think about taxes strictly from income taxes. And certainly we should not be giving advice about income and income taxes, but we also have to be very careful about giving advice about a tax situation, you know, with your clients. So just a big warning, be careful, stay in your own lane. One of the business partners you guys want to get is a CPA that you can refer to and send clients to. Talk to Joe, he'll answer that question. So it's not like you say, I don't know. No, you're going to refer someone. Okay. All right. So you guys chose to stay here in the room, and I'm grateful. What do you want to learn? What's important to you about property taxes? Everything. Okay.
Supplemental, I really.
What are supplementals? We can.
Well, I know what it is.
Well, okay. Oh, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that too.
Got it, but like.
We're going to go over it again. It's actually gotten way simpler. Anything else? Okay. So here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to talk about property taxes at a kind of a high level. Property taxes work in California. Where do you get the info? Okay, where do you find out what a property taxes are on a property? How do you calculate expected property taxes on a real estate transaction? So you're representing a buyer, they want to offer this amount of money. What are their taxes going to be? How to interpret the significance of the number you just figured out? Big deal. Big deal. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. Then we're going to talk about supplementals. I'm going to hopefully answer all your questions. Then we're going to talk about transfer taxes, which we don't talk enough about. What the heck is a transfer tax? Then we're going to touch briefly on Prop 19, and I'll tell you all about that. And there'll be time for questions. That's what we're going to do. Sound good? All right. So, property taxes. So the first thing we need to know about property taxes is they are county-based. Alameda County charges the property taxes to all the homeowners. Contra Costa County charges the property taxes to the homeowners there. It is not a federal thing. It is not a state thing. And it is not a city thing. It is county. Okay. If you are paying, anyone here a homeowner? No. I'm a homeowner here in Alameda County. When I get my bill for property taxes, the address I'm sending it to is downtown Oakland on Alice Street. That's where the county tax assessor's office is. If I were paying in Contra Costa, I would be sending my payment to Martinez, where the county tax assessor's office is. Okay. Prop 13. In California, we have a history that is very important for you to just understand at a high level. Back 50 years ago, there was a taxpayer revolt. Taxpayers thought property taxes were way too high. So what they did is they put a ballot measure. We're having an election this fall, so there's going to be ballot measures, right? These propositions, anyone familiar with that from previous elections, right? There's going to be one of those on the ballot this November. And this one, Prop 13, was on the ballot in the 1970s. And it passed and became law. Now, what did Prop 13 say? Prop 13 said that your taxes for your homes are going to be based on the sale price, and they are limited to 2% increase a year. And they cannot be increased any more than 2% a year. And there were other provisions in it, but those are the two big things. It's going to be based on the price of the property being sold, and it can't go up more than 2% a year. So that's really important because it's created inequities over time and unintended results, which is always what happens. But that's the way it works, and it will always work. There's little political willpower to change it, even though it's got problems. Okay? So with that in mind, you need to understand that taxes are made up of two main elements, if you will, two main components. One is the ad valorem fee. Does anyone know what ad valorem means? Yes, according to value. And we are going to talk about how they calculate that in a minute. Then the second major part are direct assessment fees. These are, I'm going to talk about in a minute too, but they're not according to value. They're differently calculated. Those two things, when added together, give you your property taxes. Does anyone here in the room know when property taxes are, how property taxes are calculated time-wise?
Year. I always forget that. And
You're on the right track. I'm gonna go into more detail on the next slide. But there's two things that what is important about it is the timeline for calculation doesn't match when the bills are sent out or when the properties are sold. So you could have a situation where the taxes for the year are calculated in January. The whole home is a distressed property and is sold to a flipper in March. The flipper then sends out, gets it renovated and sells it again in July. And then the new homeowner gets the tax bill in the fall for that year that was calculated in January. And it's based on the price before the flip. Okay, that is very common. The important thing to remember is that the tax year runs from July to June. It is not a calendar year. So the county will be figuring things out for a July through the following June tax year. Impound accounts. I'm going to introduce the idea of impound accounts. Basically, what we're talking about here is when your buyer doesn't pay their taxes themselves twice a year, like Dustin said, but that when the lender pays on the buyer's behalf. We're going to talk more about that in a slide as well. So let's talk about ad valorem first. Ad valorem, according to value. This is by far and away always the biggest part of the tax. So if the tax was 10,000, probably 8,000, 8,500, even 9,000 of it is this ad valorem. Okay. Now, ad valorem is usually at least 1.1% of the sale price. Okay, so if the sale price is $1 million, we're talking about $10,100 for the ad valorem at a minimum. Now, the great news is it's never exactly 1.1%. I'm going to show you where to find out exactly what it is for any property you're evaluating. When you're doing client consultation around an offer, knowing what their tax is going to be makes you look super informed. Okay. They could find it themselves if they're sophisticated, but it is often so buried that they don't find it, right? So it's really great if you know where to look and can tell them for a number of reasons we're going to get into. Everyone clear about this idea of ad valorem? Okay. The base tax. Okay. Let's talk about the second component. Remember I said it's two, right? So these are called direct assessment tax. And what these are smaller fees, very specific for local services, like the emergency services, the waste management, sewer, that's waste management, water, school taxes. Has anyone ever noticed that around election time, they start saying, we want to do a 1/4%, and we want to do a 1/4% rise in the sales tax, or we want you to pass this measure for the unified school district, or we want you to do this, all these detailed requests at the city level, sometimes the county level. Those are usually property tax based, and they are usually some small amount. So the city will go to the voters and say, listen, we want to charge $200 for lighting so that we can light all the streets properly. I'm just making this up. And all the property owners have to pay $200 per year. That is what we're talking about here. And when you get a property tax bill or view one for one of your clients, you can actually see all of these line items. They're all line item things, annualized. Sometimes you get these same kind of direct fees at a community level. If you've ever done an open house in Marina Bay for Sarah Minjao or for anybody else, that neighborhood in Richmond, everyone familiar with Marina Bay in Richmond? Anyway, good. Yeah. So it's a cool neighborhood. I lived there for 8 years. I loved it. Very pretty, very clean, very safe. They have their own property tax, one of these direct assessments. So when people in Marina Bay get their property tax bill, they'll be higher than the people who live on Cutting on the other side of 580. Because they don't have the Marina Bay redevelopment fee. The other thing about the redevelopment fee is it's development specific. So some properties in Marina Bay have it and other properties don't. So it's all over the map even there. Then you get Mello-Roos and other development specific annual fees where the developer cuts a deal with the county and they say, listen, we are going to build a whole subdivision. This happens out in Antioch, Pittsburgh, Bay Point, Eastern Contra Costa County a lot. We're going to build a whole subdivision, and in exchange for you letting us build a whole subdivision and build out the land this way, the city said make certain demands. Yeah, we'll let you do it, Mr. Developer, but you put in the fire hall, and you put in the lights, and you put in the roadways, and you maintain all that stuff, or at least you get it paid for by. And so what they do is they call that a Mello-Roos tax. It's called Mello-Roos. So if you see Mello-Roos in confidential remarks, that's what we're talking about. Now, this is a big deal because this can be hundreds of dollars a year. It can be high. It can really dramatically impact the property taxes. And the reason the agents put it in a disclosure package and put it into their confidential remarks is that it is outsized impact on property taxes versus a neighboring house in another subdivision that didn't have that. Maybe hundreds of dollars, maybe even over $1,000. A buyer would want to know that, right? So that's what Mello-Roos is. It's just another one of these direct assessments that shows up on the property tax bill, but it's so significant, so large that we typically disclose it more aggressively. Can I go on? Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
It's different taxation.
I'm getting to that. Okay, let's talk about timeline and payment due dates a little more. As I said, the tax year runs from July to June. Okay? Now, here's what happens. The county calculates the assessment early in the year, January, February, for the upcoming July to June segment. So they're 4 months ahead of when the bills are due, right? When the tax is accruing. The tax bills are sent to the homeowners in the early fall. So they figure it out in the early part of the year. The tax year starts in July. The owners get their first bill 3 months after the start of the 3-4 months after the start of the tax year. They get two bills. They get one letter in the mail, right? Or digitally, but the one letter has two coupons on it. They take the total tax owing and they divide it into. So hypothetically, if you owe $10,000, 5,000 is due November 1st, late December 10th. The other 5,000 is due February 1st and late April 10th. Yes.
Is there a little saying they have that?
Yeah,
Remember,
I forget what it
I
is.
never.
Yeah, from real estate school. The real estate schools have a mnemonic to memorize this. So go back to your notes. I don't remember what it is. Yeah, Robert Rico makes them. No damn. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, no damn fooling around. Yeah. Now, why does he say no damn fooling around?
Take it. Let's take the property.
That's right. They'll take the NDFA because they'll take the property. The taxes are the number one obligation, financial obligation against any property.
Biggest lien, right?
The first, not necessarily, it's the first lien. So you may not realize it, but when you take a mortgage on a property, or you owe money on a mechanic's lien, or you have any kind of other financial obligation against the house, all of the financial obligations are put into order. And people have first right, second right, third right. Taxes, number one, all the time. They can foreclose on you, even if you're current on your mortgage. And if the lender does a foreclosure, they have to pay the tax people out of their proceeds. They can't not pay the tax people. They have to make that good. Tax people get paid first, as it should be. Anyway, so that's how this works from a financial point of view. Okay. And as I said, this can cause all kinds of problems. If you have property changing hands, since property is ad valorem, it's based on value. So it creates problems. Okay. And that's where supplementals come in, which we're going to get to in a little bit. All right. Are we totally confused? Or okay, go ahead.
I'm not confused.
Okay,
That makes perfectly good sense.
Yeah.
Trust. When you transfer in a trust, does that
No.
No. You know.
Oh, no. I know what you're asking.
Um,
So normally the thing that triggers a reassessment
Yeah.
is a sale at arm's length
Yeah.
to a third party who is not part of a trust or part of the family. If you did a transfer, interfamily transfer, those are exempt.
So
Let's suppose the spouse,
Same.
yeah,
Bro.
if the spouse loses the house in the divorce, the spouse that keeps the house doesn't have a property tax reassessment. Right now, on death, without a trust, there is a reassessment.
So
If someone dies without a trust, there is a reassessment.
Okay. So if
But-
like say my grandmother passes away, she owns a bunch of properties, and then the kids want to sell them maybe between themselves. Like one gets one, another one gets one. This kid wants to sell theirs, but they give the right to the other. If they bought it,
Yeah,
that it wouldn't they wouldn't get assessed again.
they would, if it was within a okay, I'm not a lawyer. It gets a little legal here. My understanding is that interfamily transfers do not trigger a reassessment. However, the fact that someone died, it might trigger a reassessment. So if it's in a trust or not in a trust, these are legal issues.
I got to talk to
The bottom line, yeah, the bottom line is your seller, if they're selling soon enough, the reassessment is not going to be a lot of money, right? Let's suppose the home was in the family for decades. And so the current tax is like $3,000.
Yes.
And they are going to now sell it. They want to sell it as quickly as they can, but it's going to sit in probate for 3 months. You know, the amount of difference of the property tax they're going to owe over 3 months isn't going to be that dramatic in most cases. However, that being said, don't get hung up on it. Send them to a CPA. Find out exactly what their situation is. Like I said before, don't get hung up on figuring this out for your clients. Simply say, hey, there may be an issue here with probate. There may be an issue here with trust and how your property tax is going to be figured out. Go talk to the lawyer or the CPA or both. Good question, though. All right, should I move on?
Please, state, does this happen? State,
Yes, this is all of California. Everything I'm talking about today is about California.
in San Diego.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a really nice, Del Mar.
Yeah, Del Mar. Mhm.
Yeah. she had a long time the mom, but she was kind of care about the reassessment of taxes because now the property is so high.
Did
It was in a trust.
so talk to the lawyer.
She's-
Yeah, the lawyer and the CPA will answer the question of how the taxes will be impacted. Because it is possible if your family member does not want to sell, that whoever is now the responsible for the property is gonna get hit with a whopping tax bill. Yeah, as effective of the day of death is when this things happen, so not retroactive. Okay, let's keep going. Impound accounts. Okay, so as I said before, you get 2 tax bills a year, but if your buyer or your seller pays well, let me back up. Some buyers, if they have low down payment mortgages, like 5%, 10%, FHA, 3.5%, some buyers they're required by the lender to pay 1 month's worth of the taxes that are owed with their loan payment. That's called an impound account. So the loan payment is not just principal and interest, it's principal, interest, and taxes. Okay? And usually some other elements too. We used to use the term PITI, P-I-T-I, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. Okay, so this happens as a requirement if your borrower gets an FHA loan or a low down payment loan. The lender basically says, I'm sorry, you don't have an option here. Okay, now, if you're 10% or more, it becomes optional. But a buyer may still choose to pay it monthly to the lender instead of paying it twice a year themselves. They can make that choice. So when a buyer says or is forced to pay their property taxes through their monthly payment, the payment to the lender does not go into the lender's regular bank account. It goes into a special bank account for the lender called an impound account. Sometimes they call it an escrow account, which is very confusing because escrow is what we do for a transaction, but it's an escrow and impound account, and it is a special bank account, and they are legally obligated to tell the owner the balance, what's going on, if there's overage or underages. They have very legal requirements about reporting back to the borrower about the status of the funds in their accounts that they're managing for them for taxes. Because the lender is going to pay the CPA, going to pay the county. So the lender is now in a fiduciary role, right? They have a legal obligation to look out for their own borrower to make sure the taxes get paid. And there's enough money in the impound account. So my question for you guys in the room is, why would a borrower choose to have an impound account if the lender does not require it? Dustin. So they don't have to think about it, like it's convenient for them. Yeah. Many people, it's just one less thing to worry about. They just know that their monthly payment for their loan is going to cover it. They don't have to worry about it. So it becomes very popular. Why would we want our buyers? What might we say to a buyer who's thinking about doing that as an alternative way of looking at it? So what you might want to tell your buyers is, yes, that's true. And if you pay the property taxes through your mortgage, there are 2 things that are going to happen. Number one, you are going to have a higher closing cost on your purchase because the lender will demand 8 to 12 months of prepayment for funding this account. So there'll be prepayments required at closing. So your lender is going to be more out of pocket than they would have otherwise been when they have the opportunity to choose. Those are called prepaid expenses. You will see them on the lender's closing documents, closing estimate and loan estimate and closing documents. And it should show up on your own net sheets that you do for your buyers. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is if the buyer spends all that money on the prepaids at the beginning and then is paying every month, they have lost control of their money. They are no longer choosing how to spend their money. Maybe they could be putting the money for the property taxes in a high interest internet bank account earning 5%. Then they go to pay the taxes and they've actually generated income for themselves instead of it sitting in a bank escrow where they get nothing, if anything, if they get any interest at all, it's pennies. So there's a financial management piece that you can advise your buyers. Hey, you're absolutely right. It'll be more convenient. What I typically tell my buyers is, hey, listen, if you're good with money, if you like to be really detail oriented with your budgets and you like to manage all of it very closely, you don't want impounds because you lose control of your money. But if this is just a nightmare to you and it's way too intense, you can do it. You know, knowing your closing costs will be higher. Do you see how this type of information to a buyer is a real value add? We did a class a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you guys were there, on benefits and features of working with a buyer agent. This is sort of that kind of juice, right? Okay, good answers. Thank you. Where do you get property tax info? Anyone want to guess before I tell you? Yes, but not directly.
You can look through the MLS.
Yes. There are two places. You can get a link to it from the MLS. If you go to our MLS, there's a big box at the top of the main screen that says tax. And when you go to that box, you can put in any property address anywhere in the state, and you can look up the tax report. And that will give you, in most cases, the most recent information. Not always, but in most cases. Another place where we get tax info is the Natural Hazard Report, the NHD report. Has anyone ever seen an NHD report? Good. Doesn't Terry, you've never, yeah, right. So this is a disclosure report. So you've heard of disclosure, usually you heard brand new. You've heard about disclosure reports from the seller, where we get all this list. We get their seller property questionnaire. We get their transfer disclosure statement. We also get the preliminary there's all these disclosures. We have a whole class we're going to teach on disclosures, by the way. Anyway, one of the things they give us is something called the Natural Hazard Zone Disclosure Report, or it's ordered at the start of an escrow. But let's just say it's on hand in the disclosure report. You're representing a buyer, you can go look it up. You're representing a seller, you want to order it before you go in the market so you can take a look at it. Now, normally, this report is what you think it is. Fire, earthquake, flooding, the normal natural hazards. But these reports now are so sophisticated, they have reams of other data. One of the other data points is taxes. They tell you about, for this particular property, what the taxes look like. It is far more helpful than the CRS report. So if you're going to do a showing, the CRS report is fine. If you're going to write an offer, you want to look at the NHD. Okay. If you don't have an NHD, there are now more and more web portals up where you can do online research without an NHD on property taxes. We'll get to that in a minute. So there's no excuse, whether you're representing a seller or buyer, for not knowing the state of affairs around the property taxes.
When you're representing a seller, when should you order this stuff?
I like to order it as soon as I get into the listing arrangement, even if I'm not on the market yet, because it is going to be an element. The question is, when should you order this if you're representing a seller? You want to order it as soon as possible so that it's part of your disclosure package. They cost about $100, and they can be billed to escrow. They are quite happy to build escrow, so there's no out of pocket.
So if a client says they want to list in a year's time, and you have the listing presentation,
well, I would wait till it's signed. I wouldn't do any work. I mean, until you have a listing. If they say they want to list in a year's time, you're not necessarily gonna sign the listing right away. That's a judgment call. Should you sign a listing agreement with a 12-month time frame? It depends on what the work is. If the property is going to be needing a lot of labor and work to get it ready, and you're going to start immediately, then absolutely sign the listing agreement. Don't do any work without getting paid. And then you can order the natural hazard. But if they're not actually serious about this right now and they want to list with you in January, February, you would order it then. You'd order it then. All right, let's look at these. What you're looking at here is a screenshot from the MLS of the tax report, a very specific section of it. So when you get the CRS report from the tax line in this MLS, there's information about the property, bedrooms, bathroom count, sale history, and mortgage history. After sale and mortgage history, you get this section. The top part of this is the total So this is from this property, and this was done in 2023. So it had the previous 3 years, 2022, 2021, and 2020. And these numbers here are how much the tax department says this house is worth. So in 2022, the tax was assessed value on which it was calculated. Remember, we have the direct assessments and we have the ad valorem. It gets calculated based on the total assessment. The total assessment is the sum of the land and the improvements together. Improvements are the house, the property. Anything built on land is the improvement, right? So this is 253, 210 in 2022. Okay, let's suppose this is the only thing we knew about this property. We had this little piece of paper. Didn't have an MLS sheet. What do we already know? What do we know about the history of this house just from looking at this without even seeing the MLS? If the property tax assessment is 253, 210, what do we know?
Appreciated.
You're on the right track. We know the property hasn't been sold in the open market for a long time. Because what home sells in our marketplace for 253? It's been years since you could buy a house for 253,000. So you know that it's been in the same family for a very long time. Does that make sense? So you always want to look at this. The other thing is taxes. In 2022, the actual amount of taxes paid for the whole year was $4,227.96. That's really low. Okay, the people who've owned it have been paying a fraction of what their next door neighbor for the same house pays because they bought theirs 2 years ago, and these guys bought it 40 years ago. So how is that fair? Thank you, Prop 13. All right. So you're going to go do a showing, okay? You don't even need to phone the listing agent, but you will. You know, I'm noticing, Mr. Seller's agent, that the property taxes are super low. How long? And it says the property, and maybe the tax report doesn't say sales history. Often, if it wasn't sold it was sold a very long time ago, you can't find a sale date. Or if it transferred as a short sale or a foreclosure, oftentimes they got records messed up. So it might have been, you may not have, so you phone the seller and say, Mr. Seller, when did your sellers buy this house? Right? Mr. Seller, you could even call the seller's agent to verify the mortgage history. But anyway, that's what this means. Yes. This is true until this property changes hands. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Okay, we're going to talk about now what happens if this is sold. By the way, these examples I'm going to give you are a real life story, are very close. Names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it's very true. Okay, all right. This is a screenshot from a page in an NHD report, a natural hazard zone disclosure report. This is the property tax estimator page. You can do the math manually. We are going to do the math manually in a few minutes. But notice there's a link at the top of this. All of these NHD reports now have a link to an online form to figure out the property taxes. So now you can go to the Google, you can go to the intrawebs and do this without an NHD report, which is awesome. Okay, because you are meeting a client, it's good for you to know, right? What your client, based on, you could use the list price. Here's what the list price is for the property. Now, quite frankly, I would not be focused on this when I'm doing a showing. I would be focused on this when my buyer says they want to write. Because until then, it's effort that is just going to be muddy the waters for your buyer. They're not thinking about money right now. They're thinking about whether the couch will fit into the small little living room. You know what I mean? It's really, they're not ready. So I don't normally bring this out. But whether you have this whether you have this in a disclosure package from a seller, or whether you go to the internet and find these links, you can figure out the property taxes for any price you put in. And you just put in price and when you expect it to close. And then they can figure it all out, which is pretty powerful. So let's do some math. The math is already done. All you need to do is look at the numbers. So here's our example. This property that we looked at a minute ago. Let's suppose that it is sold for $700,000. The ad valorem tax is not 1.1, it's 1.377. How do we know this? It's not letting me go back today. How do we know this? For the ad valorem tax is 1.377. Where am I getting this from? Sorry. It's coming from here. Sorry. How do we know the ad valorem tax? We get it from the property tax, the NHD report. So if we go to the NHD report, see this property tax estimator, you can click on that link to figure it out, but you can also just look at the report. Estimated ad valorem tax rate right here. So you can figure it out manually. So this particular property, the ad valorem, the legal amount base, is 1.377. It is not 1.1. 1.1 is the lowest you'll ever see. Almost many properties are between 1.1 and 1.7.
See the list of taxation that.
You'll see this. You'll see this. Estimated ad valorem tax rate, which you multiply by whatever price you're going to put in. Remember, when you get the NHD, we don't know what the sale price is going to be. Not yet, not here. Yeah, maybe the next page of this, but the actual specific assessments, I think they're on the next page. Because if you look at line 4 here at the bottom, line 4, it won't let me, dang. For some reason, my backspace button isn't working. Sorry. When we look at our NHD, the 4th line down, it says 1988-08. That is the sum of all these direct assessments, which are displayed on a subsequent page. Okay, that's the total. So for each year, not only does this owner, the new owner, going to pay 1.377 times the sale price. That's just component 1. The second component of their taxes is another $2,000 near. Does that make sense? All right, let's do the numbers. So 700,000 times 1.377 is 9,639. Add to that the nearly 2,000, you have 11,627.08. So now we know that if we take our $700,000 price, the tax rate as a percentage of the price is 1.66%. 1.66%. It's not 1%. It's not 1.1%. It's not even 1.3777%. It's 1.66%. Because not only is there a high ad valorem tax, there's $2,000 a year in special direct assessments. This is a highly taxed property. Let's suppose this buyer is going to put it into their mortgage. We can tell our buyer this is $968.92 a month. That's a lot of big chunk of a monthly payment. That's a lot of money. Why is this important? Why do we care about that 1.6 I calculated? What does it make? It's hugely important. Why? Because the sad truth is most of our lender partners use 1.25% on pre-approvals. It can be a huge difference. Now, your lenders, who are perfectly lovely people, had to pick a number. And they looked around their whole service area and said 1.25 is a good general number. However, before you get the pre-approval for your offer, you want to go back because this is a problem. This could be a big problem. Dustin's already seen it. Let's look at the numbers. Let's suppose that the lender uses 1.25, but the actual tax rate in our example is 1.66. And by the way, this has really happened. Okay, the sale price has been changed, but everything else about it's the same. The lender's estimate of the monthly tax rate is only going to be $729 at 1.25%. But the actual tax rate is $968.92, which means the borrower is gonna need to come up with nearly $240 more each month. I would want my lender to take another look at that pre-approval. Can I really afford 700? Maybe I can now only afford 690. But your lenders won't do it if you don't ask them. They are not studying the NHD report to verify, many of them. There are some really good ones out there who are all over this, but some of them don't check it. Some of them don't check it. So you go to a lender, you get your buyer pre-approval letter, your buyer comes to you. Joe Smith lender gave me a pre-approval letter, I'm all good. Your job as Go agents who go above and beyond is to verify the pre-approval before you write your offer. That's going above and beyond. It was in my class on going above and beyond, right? And what I said was verify the pre-approval letter with the lender. Well, that's more than just calling the lender and saying, are they still pre-approved? Which is part of the question, absolutely. Mr. Lender, were you aware that this home has all these direct assessments? My calculation of the property taxes is 1.66%. Have you factored that into your pre-approval? Push. Ask. Be vigilant. Who are you? Who is your client? Who's your client?
Buyer.
The buyer. And what kind of duty do we have to the buyer? And that means
Yes.
looking out for them ahead of our own interests, looking at the world through their eyes. Don't you think that a buyer who you share with this change and you talk to the lender and they understand it's going to be $200 more that they didn't understand before is going to have a pretty favorable view of you? And if they insisted on working with their own lender who wasn't as well versed in this stuff, that they're now going to be more open to talking to your lender? Just saying. It's all part of this going above and beyond business. Yes.
And Stephen, you talking with their lender to make sure that they have that covered, they're gonna like you even more because their lender missed something that you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And she didn't really, I don't think she understand how property tax work here. And then she sold her property and she bought in another town, and then the monthly payments came, and then she knew how much she will be paying because she pays every month the same. But when we look at the list and say, your property taxes went really high, you're paying this chunk of money just on property taxes, and she's like, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak about Texas.
Yeah.
Every state does this differently, so it may work differently in Texas. I'm just talking about California, to be really clear. But you're right, it may be the same thing. Yeah, it would have been helpful. And her agent let her down in a way. So we need to know. All right, let's keep going because we have a lot more to do. Supplementals. Okay, so the way to think about supplementals is they are an extra tax expense for buyers in the first year or two of ownership. No more than that. And this happens when the previous owner's tax burden is less than the new owner's tax burden. The price went up a lot from when they bought it. That is to say, the new owner is paying more than the previous owner paid for the property by a lot. Why do we have supplementals? It's caused by a delay in the county assessor's office catching up with the change in ownership. Why are they delayed? Because they do their calculations in January, February. For a year coming starting July, they won't be billed until the fall. That's why this happens. That's why we have supplementals. These are extra tax bills when they finally catch up. When are they going to catch up? Let's take a scenario we talked about at the start of the class. Assessment happens in January, February. Flipper buys it in March. Flipper sells it in June. Now it's changed hands twice. Okay, your buyer is the buyer in June. They get the bill in September, October, which is way low, right? So their impound account is getting really big, or maybe they have a lot of money that they didn't have to spend that they thought they would, right? And then the following January, February, it's going to get reassessed again. Anyway, it gets even more complicated if there are two transfers over 2 tax years. One tax year before June 30th and another transfer between June and September. Then you suddenly have it happen twice. Now, sometimes the counties are getting smart and doing the catch-ups faster, but not enough faster for this to be anything but a problem. Okay, so you can use the NHD report to figure out exactly what the supplementals are going to look like, at least a very, very close estimate. You should warn your clients to expect an extra tax bill in the months after they buy the property. The last thing you want is your buyer who had such a great buying experience to get stung by a $2,000 or $3,000 bill in the mail in February that they didn't know was coming. Never let that happen. Okay. I have recommendations about how you avoid that. Number one, when you are doing your offer preparation, show them the statewide buyer and seller advisory form, page 11, item number 8. Oh, sorry, before we show you that, this is the NHD report page for supplemental estimator. You can do it manually, you can use a link, same as before. This presentation, I'm going to send you the whole slides. At the end, you'll see. Although you can take all the pictures you want. You can include with your offer, or at least have your buyer sign, this supplemental tax bill advisory from the county. That's one way they might remember if they are asked to sign something. You can discuss with them section 8, page 11 of the statewide buyer and seller advisory, notice of your supplemental property tax bill. Okay. What else can you do? I don't know why my backspace isn't working today. What else can you do besides those things that I just told you to help avoid buyer shock at getting that letter in the mail? What steps can you take as a good, diligent agent?
Talk to them about that.
Yeah.
First.
You're on the right track, but let's suppose you told them about it when you met with them and we're talking about the particular property, getting ready to write the offer. You showed them what the NHC was telling you. You told them about the big discrepancy. You impressed them with how you're going to talk to the lender about the monthly payment. You mentioned it then. You had them sign the statewide buyer and seller advisory. Then you even took the time when they reviewed the disclosures to point out page 8, number 8. What else can you do?
Give a follow-up after this.
Yes. That's exactly what we do on my team. In the 3rd month after the closing, or sooner, depending on the time of year, we send out an email. Hey, happy to hear, or phone, text, email, maybe all 3. So happy you're settling into your new home. I'm so glad the move went well. By the way, don't forget what we talked about. Don't forget what we talked about. You're going to get a supplemental to catch up on the property taxes. Be ready for it. Okay. Just that'll help. That'll help. But the reason it'll help is because most buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are so overwhelmed. There's so much they have to do in that first deal, and they're first-time buyers, and there's so much going on. They may have completely forgotten. But 3 months out, they're enjoying the living room. They love the kids are playing on the swing set that they bought in the backyard, right? Whatever, the tree house has been built, whatever. Now they can get that in their head. Oh yeah, he did tell me about that. Or I forgot about that. Completely forgot about whatever.
Now, if they're late on them, do they assess penalty?
Yes, absolutely. 5% of the amount of the bill. It's very steep. And they can foreclose. All right. Transfer taxes, because we're running out of time. Transfer taxes are not the same, but they are property based. So whereas the property taxes go with the property and they're annual for a full life of ownership, transfer taxes are one-time fees. One-time fees charged by counties and cities every time a property is sold, in most cases. There are a few exceptions. So there are 2 transfer taxes. There's the county property tax and the city property tax. Okay. The county property tax is typically $1.10 times $1,000 of transfer value, basically 1/1000th of the price. So for our $700,000 sale price example, you divide that by 1,000. That leaves you with 700. You multiply the 700 by 1.1, you have $770. Okay. In our market, the county transfer tax is so small as to be almost immaterial, almost negligible. People are not hung up on this. Now, you want your seller to know because in most of Alameda and Contra Costa County, the seller pays this closing cost. It's a closing cost, right? And the seller normally pays it. Yes. There are some cities that don't have it, where it's 50-50. In Alameda City, it's typical custom to do 50-50 split with the buyer. Split at 50-50. 373. I can't do the math in my head. It's 770 divided by 2 for each side. It would be part of the closing costs in Alameda. Now, let's suppose you're saying, well, I don't know what's going on in Alameda. I've never sold a house there. What are the closing costs? You can Google that too. Or you can call your title rep and it'll tell you in Alameda, it's 50-50. And then you'll see all these other cities, Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, San Leandro, 100% seller, 100% seller. Most everywhere else, with some exceptions. Yes. That's a very good question. I don't know how the custom happened that it split in Alameda. It just is. It is paid as a closing cost, no out of pocket, right? It's paid as a closing cost. So the seller has it reduces the money they get. So if they were going to get $1 million, they get 999,630. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, no, that's not right. 230. Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay. Let's talk about the city transfer tax. That didn't do what I wanted to. City transfer tax. Many cities in our area charge this, but not all do. The amount they charge varies. This is why you want to know what it is right now for the city you're selling in, or that you're representing a buyer, writing an offer, so you can give a buyer, yes, Mr. Buyer, you are going to have this. It is typically split 50-50, but it is also a negotiable item. And some people will ask the seller to pay all of it. But it's or in certain cases where it's competitive, say Mr. Seller or the buyer will pay all of it. But it's typically the custom is to split it 50-50. And it's also paid through the closing as a closing cost for each side. It is a lot more money. It is a lot more money. In Oakland, under $1 million, and it varies not just by city, but it varies by sale price in some locations. So in Oakland and Berkeley, if the price I think is 1.5 million or less, then it is $15 per $1,000. So you take your 700, you multiply by 700 times 1.5, and you get to, I think, 10,500, right? And divide that by 2, that's $5,000 a side. So it's a lot of money. It's a big closing cost. Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, San Leandro, Hayward, El Cerrito, I believe Richmond too. There are a lot of areas that do and a lot that don't. Okay, Alameda for sure. This is important. You know about this, so you can advise your buyers. It's a one-time hit. It may be tax deductible in the year of purchase. Tell your clients to talk to their CPA. It's always nice to get that tip. Many closing costs on a home purchase are deductible in the year of the purchase. Tell your buyers to talk to their CPA. Okay, I want to talk about Prop 19, then we're done. Prop 19 passed in 2021. It was a new law as a result of, again, a public referendum. And it said that people who are 55 years of age or older or disabled are allowed to transfer their property transfer their property taxes from their old property to their new property. So in the example we had earlier, those folks who were selling at $4,000 a year, they would love to only pay $4,000 a year, because where can you buy any property right now with taxes that low? No, pretty much nowhere, unless you're living in a hovel by the side of the road, assuming it's taxable. So that's the basic idea. You always want to mention this to your clients who are 55 plus or disabled who are selling. You always want to mention. Should you figure it out, stay away from it. It gets very complicated. It is a ratio between the sale price and the new purchase price. There are certain limitations depending on time frames. It gets really complicated really quickly. If you want more information about it, Google Prop 19 Also, there's a link to a website here where you can do an estimate, but I would not do that unless you're talking about your own property, because this gets so complicated. You want a CPA involved in telling your client, yes, you will qualify, or no, you won't. And here's how it'll impact you. So, yeah. So that's Prop 19. Can be very powerful, right? And because, imagine you're a buyer, you're a seller, and you're looking at a $10,000 a year extra hit for property taxes just by moving. Why would you sell? So your seller says to you, I'm really worried about selling because I'm going to have to buy at market value and pay all these huge property taxes now. And you say, well, Mr. Seller, are you aware of Prop 19? Oh, no, what's Prop 19? Boom. Now you've shown your value as realtors yet again. Okay, that's it. Anyone have any questions? I know I threw a lot of information at you and you've asked some questions throughout. Does anyone have any other questions? If you take a picture of this screen, of this QR code, you fill out a very brief form, my assistant will send you this presentation. Isn't that awesome? So you can have a copy of the presentation. If you want to listen to this again, it's on my coaching channel. That's it, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Who?
Your speaker? The speaker from.
From where?
Please.
I don't think so. Have her come in. I'll talk with her. I have to stop this class though. I had a speaker from Bay East. Okay, we'll figure that out.